And so you may be telling him something super important and it's not going to click. Like his firefighters are coming up and like, who wants to fight? You know? And that's, I think, a lot of the times where men really kind of get at a disadvantage, because like when you're having a disagreement or something like that, that it really hits on like a trauma point for a man, like it's very easy to go into that, like, I'm going to fight now and I'm going to fight with you. And at that point, like, it doesn't matter if you're saying something super important or you're saying nothing, like none of it's getting through.
I feel like it's like that with any angry part or any part that's going into fight mode. Yeah.
Pay attention to that, because that could be a real cue to be like, okay, we need to take a step back, or we need to like reorient this conversation, because at that point you're not there, there's no communication. Like that's a cue of communication breakdown.
Yeah.
And you want to avoid that, because
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. What's one of your communication breakdowns?
Shutting down.
Yeah, so shutting down, really real shutting down.
Yeah, getting quiet. I just get like really in my head.
And like physically for you, how do you experience that?
Not making eye contact is a big one. Yeah, I mean, it just feels like a shutdown, like not making eye contact. Like maybe my shoulders are hunched, maybe not. Like I just want to curl up and go lay in bed.
One thing I've noticed,
or I freeze.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed when you disconnect is, a lot of like, you'll just kind of look off in the distance and like you get kind of tall, like you get kind of haughty.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do not look at me.
I don't look at you. You know,
you're looking away from me. You kind of look off into the distance like I'm not there.
Really? Yeah. Yeah, like avoiding eye contact. Like I even do that just when I'm thinking of, just when I'm too much in my head. And sometimes you have to say, like, I'm trying to connect with you right now. And then I'm like, oh yeah, connection. Like I just forget. Yeah, I can get lost. I can forget about it. And so I really appreciate it when you're like really explicit about that, because then I know, like, oh, okay, yeah, it's time for me to like engage some of my heart parts instead of like just being in my mind, or engage some of my body.
Yeah, because one of the things, like we kind of mentioned, nonverbal communications are a great, or like a very powerful tool to initiate verbal communication. And I think there's one thing I would caution people is like, when you bridge that gap, try and do it from a place of curiosity and not a place of like demand, where it's just like, hey, I'm trying to talk to you and you're often like nowhere.
Don't shame them for that.
Yeah. Like we always say, and we'll say 1,000 times more, try not to use shame. Actually, just don't use shame. Don't try.
It's not actually necessary for anything.
Yoda didn't use shame.
Yeah, like whenever there's a part that comes up, whether it's shutting down or fight or flight, like the issue is safety. And so like if you're shaming them for like shaming those parts of you for trying to protect you, like those parts are that's just going to cause even more inflammation. And that's not going to cause that. Like the best thing that you can do for them is like help them feel safe in that moment. And usually curiosity is a great way to help people feel safe, and compassion. Those two things.
Yeah, like you can start the conversation of saying, I'm noticing you're really not wanting to look at me while we're having this conversation. Like, is there something going on that you'd like to say, or that a part of you is feeling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's one thing I want to add too that I think is a really interesting thing that I know Tony Robbins does when people are in distress. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's like conversation shock, where you say something really absurd or you say something really shocking that like derails their train of thought and kind of like sends it spinning so that you can reorient it back to what you're saying. Like one example I saw that was really crazy was he was talking with someone during his seminars, and the guy was like freaking out because he wanted to kill himself, and he was kind of going into that real emotional spiral. And Tony Robbins was like, I like your red shoes. Just like in the middle of this conversation where this guy was freaking out, just like out of nowhere. And the guy was like, huh, what are you talking? I'm not even wearing red shoes. And he's like, that's great, let's get back to the conversation. Like, you were talking about this, and it just broke that train of thought. And I was like, oh, that's such a weird thing, but I've seen him do it a lot, and it's one of his kind of signature moves. And I don't know if I've ever had an opportunity to use it, but it is one of those things too, where when you recognize a nonverbal communication or a nonverbal cue that your partner is giving to you in kind of a stressful situation, it can be that kind of stimulus of like, hey, you're just fiddling with your hands over there. Like, what's going on? Like, there's a part of you that's fiddling with your hands. Is there's something they want to say, or something that like they're frightened about, or and it can kind of shock that thing of like, oh shit, yeah, I am like fiddling with my hands. What am I feeling? So that curiosity, that questioning invitation.
Yeah. This makes me want to be more explicit with my body about how I'm feeling. Although I have parts that they're afraid of it, because they're like, if we actually expressed in our body the emotions that we were feeling, like you would think we were crazy. Like we would be too much. We would like, you wouldn't like us anymore, and we would be all alone.
Well,
and then we would die.
Yes, parts.
Yeah, it's so crazy how high stakes this feels. Because I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, growing up, like showing my emotions in some certain circumstances like could have been life or death, actually.
Yeah, showing your nonverbal cues.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like it is about going slow and helping those parts feel safe slowly to show more and more and more. Like I can't override those parts.
Yeah, this is a really important part too, because I think one of the things that narcissistic people do is they have a real attenuation to nonverbal cues, because that's how they manipulate you. Is they notice you're in a state of duress and they're like, all right, I got you. Because I have noticed this talking with like super narcissistic people, when you are more spatially aware of what you're doing with your body, like it really derails their story. When you like, I had one time with a boss who was freaking out at me because I was checking his like destructive narcissistic actions, and like I felt myself wanting to like really close because it was a full frontal attack. And I noticed that and was like, okay, I'm going to calm my breath. I could feel my breath getting really shallow and short, and it's just like, no, I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm just going to sit here like nothing's happening. And like I could see the frustration in his face of like, this isn't working. Why isn't this working? Like, why aren't you shrinking? And like it was one of those things where it's just like, there you go.
That's the thing. Like if narcissists don't get your positive attention, like they want your negative attention. Right. And if you don't give them either, like the worst thing is indifference. The worst thing is them having no impact on you.
And like this is another thing that I found really to be a true thing, is like proximity can be also a non-verbal cue. Like if someone always wants to kind of like be away from you so that they can like really shout and really be expressive and like use their hands and all this kind of crazy shit, like of course you have to watch out for your own personal safety, but like you can close that gap a little bit, bring that intimacy in there where there's not the opportunity for someone to shout at you. And like that can really lower the boiling temperature. I do this with you. Like
can I shout?
No, you don't shout, but like I try to like get closer to you.
Really?
Yeah. And like
when?
Like when you're, I don't know, in duress, like just trying. I mean, it's also energetics too. Like I'm trying to, there's like some times where I'm like, okay, like I can tell she's getting upset about something. So I'm going to really put out even breath work, calm energy, and then like get close to you and just let that kind of soak in.
Oh my God. I'm loved so well, you guys. Jesus Christ.
And like, you gotta pay attention, because it doesn't always work too, because proximity can also be a very triggering thing for people as well. So don't like box someone into a corner and be like, give me a hug. Because that could be a real crazy thing. But like for men to men, like nonverbal communication, like getting close to someone, but not too close. Like don't be in someone's face. That's a real huge like sign of offense. But like getting to, arm's length when you're talking with someone is a much more, I don't want to say civil, but like a much more at even like energetic and physical stance, versus like when someone's really trying to back away from you and like build up some steam so that they can, I don't know, be crazy. It makes a difference when you kind of keep that even distance of like, no, I'm not going to let you like take away this conversation. Like, we're going to stay right here and we're going to talk this through. Kind of similar thing. I've done this with bosses when they kind of get spun up, and it's just like, I'm going to stay close to you so you don't have the opportunity to freak out on me. And like, it works. It definitely works. But don't get too close. That's a weird thing. Like arm's length, people. If you get in someone's face, like, you're asking for it. Like, that is a very offending nonverbal cue. And like, some people are just weird about it.
It's different for different cultures too, but
of course there's always that. But like, I think even kind of in general, I would say